David, thank you so much for joining us today. We are so excited to have you here.
I'm so excited. This is going to be a lot of fun, Nina.
Oh, it really is. I feel like not enough parents really talk about financial literacy, especially with little ones like we do, like we have, and a lot of our listeners have. So I cannot wait to pick your brain and learn all the things that we need to know. But before we get really into this topic, we'd love for us and our listeners to learn more about you. So please, David, tell us about yourself, about your background, and how you ended up where you are today.
Yeah, so I've got two young boys. I mean, they're not so young now. They're 12 and 14. So they're getting on, but two young boys, and I've always been like a bit of a money nerd. So even when I was young, and so I've always loved finance and started investing when I was fairly young, and then got into real estate in my early 20s. And then as my boys got older, I was trying to figure out ways to like pass on this information to them. So I wrote a graphic novel to teach kids about financial literacy. And it's just been this really amazing, fun experience because I'm a money nerd, but I know most people aren't. So I want to make it
Mm.
fun. Like my kids, they don't love these conversations either. So I want to make it fun for them. How are they going to learn this stuff? And also try to take away a lot of like the shame and insecurity and all the emotion we have when it comes to money. So that's sort of been my current passion, is basically inspiring this message and sharing it and teaching parents how to talk about money with their kids.
I love it because you're so right. I was always raised you shouldn't talk about politics, sex, or money when it comes to any conversation with people. And when it comes to money, I feel like I now don't get me wrong, I'm not saying like talk to maybe a stranger about this, but definitely talking to your kids about it. So then because it's not like the school systems are teaching them anything and we are their greatest teacher. So setting them up for success, especially when it comes to finances, I think is crucial. So now I need to know all the things because, as I just told you before, I have a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old, and I think it does need to start that early. But again, maybe it doesn't. You're going to tell me everything I need to know. So, but I have to say, you said you got really interested in this at around like 10 years old. How did you become passionate about finance? What was it?
So it's so funny. I mean, a lot of it, and I'm realizing more and more talking about this, it really comes back to like my dad because he was a commercial diver, worked
Mm,
really hard, hated his job. Just it was just so miserable. And he was
mm,
one of these like work hard, play hard kind of guys and never had time for the kids. And then even when he was home, he'd be out with his friends and just for him, work was work. And if it was
mhm,
fun, he kept saying like, if this was fun, it would be a hobby. And that really sort of stuck with me even as a kid. I was like, this just isn't, it seems like there has to be another way. And then once I
mm.
started learning that money could earn money, even just through interest in a savings account, it just all of a sudden I looked at money differently and I saw it as a tool and not something that had to be so hard. And so I don't know, that just it is funny. It doesn't make sense, but I was a bit of this, this funny kid that was curious. I'd read books. I read finance books when I was like 10, and I just found the stuff fascinating because I saw another path than what my dad was on
Mhm.
that could create more freedom, more ease, and it didn't have to be as hard as he was making it out to be.
Oh, I love that. And I love that for you. Your dad must be so proud and jealous maybe a little bit. But that's just so cool and fascinating for our listeners. Can you explain financial literacy? Like what is it? What does that mean?
Yeah, so for me, I mean, that's the thing is even the words financial literacy
Yeah.
sounds heavy, and people are like, "Oh my god!" I could feel
Snooze fest.
yeah, I could feel some of the listeners already checking out. They're like, "I don't want to hear more." But all it is just talking about money. Like that's it. It doesn't have
Yeah.
to be math and economics and interest rates and all the stuff that snooze like the big snooze fest stuff. It's just talking about money. And like you said, it's interesting because those three things are the real big taboo things like
Mm.
sex, politics, money. But the irony is we talk about sex and politics all the time
All the
with our
time.
friends, with people, with the media. What we don't talk about is money. Nobody knows how much you spend on things, how much you earn, if you're in debt, if you're not, even your best friends. That's like the biggest taboo, and it just shouldn't be. And so for me, financial literacy is just talking about money. It doesn't have to be more complicated than that.
You're right. I think that that's so true. It should be a conversation that you can have at the dinner table and it not bat an eye or be uncomfortable or feel shame, because the more you know about it, the smarter you'll be and hopefully have more financial freedom. So, yes, how do you believe, David, we can boost our children's financial literacy? I think you're saying like talking about it more. What else can we do?
Well, I mean, the talking about it more is a bit like that's a really big one and so
Yeah.
actionable and easy for parents because it doesn't have to be a big lesson. It is as simple as telling kids how much things cost. That's it. And so I know you sort of opened up saying like, how old should we teach our kids or when can I teach my kids? I've got this 3 year old, 6 year old, and I want to teach them. As soon as your kids are old enough to ask you to buy them something, they're old enough to start learning about money. And it's as easy as that. And when my boys, and I say this all the time because I love this story because it worked with my boys, when they were young and they didn't understand like currency and money, they still had their things that were valuable to them. And it was chocolate bars and Lego. And so if they wanted to buy something, I could put in terms of chocolate bars and Lego. So they'd see like a teddy bear, I'd like, that's like 10 chocolate bars. They'd see like a bike they wanted, I'd be like, that's like 3 Lego sets. And just something as simple as that, already they're starting to get in their head the concept of the value of money, what it could buy instead, and just seeing even just choice. So I'm choosing this, but I could have 10 chocolate bars instead. Like it starts to land and it can happen even when they're really young because, your 3 year old could get those concepts.
Yeah, definitely. So that I was going to say that would make sense for my 3-year-old. Now, with my 6-year-old, he definitely is asking for all the things. Mommy, I want this. I want this. I want this. And I keep saying, well, that. And but I do say it in currency. I'm like, that is this much money. That is this much money. Do you have that much money? Have you saved that much money? But yeah, maybe I like that idea, giving them a bit more something that they find valuable and then using that as their currency to really understand the value of something. Is there something else that I can be doing to really help them learn about money? Should I be doing like paid chores and like managing that? I mean, I've been hearing even gosh, I went on vacation and someone was telling me for they have high schoolers, but they set up accounts through like I think it's called Busy Kid or something, and they have their own card and they can put money directly to it and they can see how they save and all this stuff. Like, when do I need to be doing all of this stuff? What should I be thinking about just to prepare myself? Because I do want them. My parents never taught me anything about money. I had to just figure it out on my own. And I don't want that for my kids. And I don't want that for our listeners' kids either. I want our children to be smarter than us. I want them to feel prepared for the real world and not just kind of like, oh, figure it out. I had to do it. Now it's your turn. So I love the idea of talking to them about it. I guess I want to know, what is the next steps? Like, what should we be doing?
Sure. So I can go through sort of what I see as like the important things, but I'll throw it out there first, like for the listeners. Like with my boys, I try not to talk too much about this stuff and make it too complicated because then it's
Right.
going to stress them out and they're always going to be thinking about money. And most of us don't love the spreadsheets and the tracking. And like, I try to figure out how do we make this practical and work and what's really important. So that's again, because I was a bit of a money nerd, I would be watching things with all those details. But looking back on like how successful I've been with money and investing, it really is mindset and habits more than anything else. So the mechanics aren't as important. So I don't focus on the mechanics because of that. So for example, when you're saying like your older son who starts wanting to buy things and look at stuff, something that has me really passionate is trying to figure out how to break this cycle of always wanting more and chasing
Mm.
more because that's what happens. It happens with our kids, but it happens as adults as well, and we just see it and feel it. There is no end. And so for me, the most important lesson is this lesson around mindset because it'll break that cycle. And it's around money mindfulness and basically getting understanding what's really important to you. And that's something I call the awesome stuff. And so it's what brings you joy, what makes you excited. And even your listeners can do it because a lot of times, like if you think of what you want to buy next, think of that thing, and that's the path you're on. There's something you have that you're looking at and you want to buy. But then if you start thinking about like what brings you the most joy, what are your favorite memories, what's the favorite thing in your house, it's probably not the same type of thing as you're chasing. It's probably, watching the kids, play with their friends and laugh, or a family vacation, or, a gift that someone gave you that has no monetary value, but massive sentimental value. So this idea of the awesome stuff is really important. And then with your kids, so you can start saying, is that your awesome stuff? And I find that is amazing in changing what they want to have, because they're just like us. Like they're looking around and they're like, we are basically just a bank for them that'll just buy anything if they can convince you. So if they see an ice cream, can I get that? They see a toy, can I get that? And they're just looking around and they just want everything. But as soon as you put it back on them, it's like, is that your awesome stuff? Even your youngest children will reflect and be like, no, like I really love X, or I really love this. And we as parents know it. Like we know that one item they have in their room, when they lose it, there's going to be a problem. If something happened to that, there's a problem. Everything else is just stuff. And even your youngest kids, they can get that lesson.
Ah, what a beautiful lesson, David. It's so true. I think consumerism, I think social media has really not helped with that, because you see this and this that can help you with saving time, and this to make your house more aesthetically pleasing or whatever. But really getting down to the basics of what brings you joy and what, like you said, the awesome stuff. I
Yeah.
think that's so powerful, and teaching them again that at such a young age. Oh, mind blowing. I love that. And how are we as parents, do you think, impacting our children's future with financial literacy?
Yeah, well, so it'd be so again, and we'll get to more other tips and stuff as well. But if we just stick with like the awesome stuff, for example, a lot of times if someone our children want something, we'll use words like, "Well, we can't afford that."
Mhm.
But it really isn't that we can't afford it. Like we can afford that ice cream. It's not that expensive. It's we're choosing not to because there's something else that we value more. Maybe it's saving, maybe it's making it at home, maybe like whatever that is, we can have that conversation with our kids. So as soon as you start, that's what I mean by talking about like the awesome stuff. So same with our words, like this is what our awesome stuff is, or this is what we value, or this is what is important. So it's not that we can't afford that, we choose not to. So again, like you said, for these kids, they don't grow up thinking like I can't afford things, I'm not worth it, I'm always going to be poor. They're growing up with a different, they're growing up empowered, choosing what's important to them. And uh, and I haven't told this story in a while, but just to really emphasize this. So I talked to someone about this concept of the awesome stuff, or they read my book and they picked it up and came back to me later. So their children had really been wanting to get a new puppy, which we can all relate to. And I mean, I love dogs, puppies are great, and they wanted them, but he knew how expensive it was and was trying to figure out a way like, how do I afford it, or how do I not do it, or what should we do? And then he realized, you know what, for me, my awesome stuff, and this is the parent, is sending mom back to school. Like that's what I really want to do. Mom really wants to go back to school. It's really expensive, but that's what I like. That's my awesome stuff. And the kids got behind it immediately. Like they were like, let's
Oh.
send mom to school. And I mean, that story gives me shivers because I picture the kids not getting their puppy and feeling like they can't get their thing and life sucks, versus we got to send our mom to school. And the outcome's the same. In both outcomes, they don't have that puppy, but completely different outcome for the kids in terms of how they feel. And that's financial literacy. It's talking about money so that we don't feel that it has control over us. We have control over it.
David, I love how you also said that you try not to talk about it too much so that it's not too overwhelming and heavy for children. So, what is the right amount? What do you think?
So a good example is my older son. So he's 14 now, and he's a spender. Like he is a spender,
It's
and
like burning in his pocket.
it is burning in his pocket. It doesn't matter how much I give him to go to the store, he will spend it all. He'll come back with a few pennies, quarters. That's it. he just can't help himself, and he knows that about himself. And so I noticed like he was starting to feel a bit of shame and worry and anxiousness, like,
Mm,
hey dad, am I good? Like, am I never going to have any money? Am I bad because I spend it all? Like, what am I going to do? And the thing is, like, when I talked about like the habits are the most important piece, and that's that saving habit. And it doesn't have to be budgeting, which is really difficult for most of us. It's just a simple habit of paying yourself first. Like, we hear that all the time. Like,
mm,
in the book, my one of my second golden rules is always save first. And this idea of just making it automated, we can do that with our kids. Like, it just has to be that easy. And if everything that comes in, they just get in the habit of a percentage of that gets saved and put aside, and saved to never be touched. That's an important piece of it as well. Like, it's not saving to buy something more expensive, it's saving to let it eventually invest and grow and create freedom for you. So that's just money you'll never touch. And that habit, even as adults, like if we think back, and if in our 20s we took, 10 or 20% of everything we ever made and just put it away, I mean, within 20 years, we could be financially free. It's insane how quickly that money can grow, and how quickly we'll forget about it as well. It's just like our taxes. Like, we don't notice our taxes, but the government knows we're going to take it off in the beginning so you don't notice it. We can do the same with our savings. And that is really important. And then they don't have to think about it. So whatever's left over, that's they could spend it. And some of your kids will be savers, some will be spenders, but really empowering them so they don't have the shame and they don't feel like they're bad if they want things. But then that reflection is that your awesome stuff, and they'll mess it up. And then after, you'll be like, you know what, mom, that really wasn't. That was a waste of my money. And those are good lessons for them to learn.
absolutely. Oh my goodness. Adults learn that lesson, and yes, it is an important lesson to learn. And I think so with savings. I definitely love that idea, and for our kids to start doing, because as soon as, the tooth fairy gives them some money or they do some chores, maybe get a couple dollars. I swear my son is the same way as your older one. He's like, "Okay, what can I immediately buy? I'm going to buy this soda that costs $3, which in what day and age that a whole soda can is $3, but it is. Um, he spends it all on just junk. So when you're saying savings with them and trying to explain to them, okay, this is money that you're never going to touch. I feel like that sounds like, oh my gosh, I'm just wasting it, this money that I could be buying something for myself. So how do you explain that to them that eventually they will use it when it's, growing, or how do you have that conversation about savings?
Yeah. So some of the younger kids, so if they're too young to question you on it, you're good. Right? Because they would, and if they're too young to question on it, they wouldn't understand the concept probably anyway. But
Right.
as they start questioning, then you're like, okay, now you get it. And you can start
Yes.
explaining, and this idea of compound interest. Like, that's really what it is. And so I like to think about money not in terms of what it can buy, but what it can earn.
Mm,
So two very different ways to think about it. So that's with the savings. So instead of thinking of like right now, usually we teach kids, let's save to buy something more expensive. What are you saving for? And then once they have enough money to buy that thing, they buy it and their savings goes to zero.
exactly.
Yeah. And then we wonder why nobody has any savings. It's because it's not saving. It's actually
Right.
just earmarked for spending. That's all it
Right.
is. As adults as well, we're not really saving. So if we look at it different, and this isn't saving to buy something. This is saving so it grows and earns money and creates freedom. They can start getting that idea. So say that money in 5 years will be worth twice as much. And then 5 years from that, or 7 years, it'll be twice as much of that. Like, it'll grow. And compound growth is one of these funny things. Like, it sounds, again, just like financial literacy, the words around it sound complicated, but it's just this idea of something that grows, and as it gets bigger, it then grows bigger, faster and faster and faster, like a snowball. And I'll tell like these fun little like stories or riddles. Like, one I love to tell kids is thinking of like a pond with like a lily pad on it. On day one, there's one lily pad. and every day the lily pads double. So on day 2, there's 2 lily pads, and on day 3, there's 4 lily pads, and this pond just keeps growing and growing and growing. And on the 30th day, that entire pond is covered in lily pads. So the question is, what day was the pond half covered in lily pads? If on day 30 was entirely covered. Do you have
Right.
a quick answer to that, or?
For me, oh gosh, is that 15 then? I don't know. I'm not do I haven't had a math class in a while, David.
That's a, well, and this is one of those things where that's exactly
Well,
it. It's
actually, no,
art,
that's not right because then it's doubling because each time. So it's probably, I mean, less than that.
and so our minds think linearly. So
Right.
15 is the answer the way our minds work.
Right.
Compound growth doesn't grow that way. Day
Right.
29 is the day that it was half covered in the lily pads.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, because it doubled. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
And so as soon as you start getting that and you see that, you're like, that's how that money can grow.
Yeah.
That's what you tell the kids. It might feel small at first, but it grows bigger and bigger and bigger. And as it gets bigger, it grows more. So that idea of that compound growth, I mean, that's for adults as well. Like it's this idea that that money will create more freedom. So it might not feel like much in the first few years, but like I said, like as we're older, if we look back and if in our 20s we started investing, like that money would have grown so much in the last like 20, 30, 40 years that it we couldn't even imagine it anymore.
Yeah, it's so true. And I appreciate you talking me through this because I've been saying, oh, if you save something, you can save up for that bicycle or whatever it is. But it's almost like telling him you have like two savings. One savings you never touch and your other savings for to save up for something that you can spend it on. And so is that what you do with your sons or how do you work on that?
Yeah, and then trying to embrace temperament because like my younger son is a saver, my older son is a spender. And it doesn't matter how much I talk about money, that's not going to change.
Right.
So the that habit of saving first, that's the important piece. So even my older son, when he was stressed out, I'm like, don't worry. If you do this, if 10 or 20% of everything that comes in just automatically gets invested and you never touch it, you won't have to worry about money as you get older. You just won't, because that money will be creating enough financial freedom for you that money won't be this massive burden. So, what you do with the leftover, I mean, I'm a saver, so I would save for the bigger things. I wouldn't buy the $3 pop because, or the soda, because it's ridiculous. But my older son would. And I don't think that's bad because even if he does, it as long as that saving investing portion happened at the beginning, the rest doesn't matter as much. Everyone's going to have different spending habits, and it's not, you can talk to them about it and reflect like, hey, do you think like we've just been at Costco and we could have bought those for 6 of them for the same price, and they can start seeing different values of money. But still, I mean, I know people, adults, and I'm sure you do as well, they
Mhm.
would still choose the vending machine every time. And it's for me, it's less about that's bad. It's more about just illustrating there's choices. So
Mhm.
the vending machine's $3, Costco maybe it was 50 cents. And if you still want to do the vending machine, that's on you. And it's
Right.
not that it's a and I could see there is the convenience. It is right there. You didn't want the delayed gratification. That's fine. Because I don't think what's happening right now is we're shaming people into spending the way we think they should spend.
Mhm.
And everybody's a little bit different. Like for me, it would drive me crazy to spend $3 at a vending machine. But my older son, he loves that, and then he'll buy two. He'll give one away for free to a friend like that. And he just, whereas I'm sitting there and like I'm not drinking pop that day. Or
Right. So true. I'm like, "Really? Why do you wanna do this?" But whatever, you're 6. That's a lesson we'll cross. We'll get there eventually. But also, David, I love how you mentioned earlier money mindfulness, and let's talk about that a little bit more. Like, what is money mindfulness?
so money mindfulness is just being a bit more present and reflecting. So much where it's just like regular mindfulness. We're thinking about the future. We're thinking about what we want. We're thinking of the next thing. But if you just pause for a moment, so that was even with the awesome stuff. It doesn't matter what your answer is. It's the fact that you just pause for a second and ask yourself, is this my awesome stuff? So even ourselves, if we want to buy something, we want to buy that new car, do that big renovation on the house, or do this big vacation. And if we just pause for a sec and just put ourselves into that moment, like when I have this thing, how
Mhm.
does it make me feel? Is this my awesome stuff? And then the answer doesn't really matter. Like it's that pause and that reflection where you start to shift what's important to you. And I've noticed that. And that's like kids notice it as well. It's so amazing because as soon as you're forced to just pause and be present and ask the question, everything changes. So the same thing with, kids and social media, and all their friends have something. So everybody wants the same thing. We all want that toy. We all want that, those shoes or whatever it might be. But if they just pause and they're like, you know what? That isn't actually what I like. I'm not into Pokemon cards. I just scatter them around my room and don't even look at them. I don't care about them, or I do. And that's what's really interesting is you'll notice that. And then the beauty of that as well is once you start noticing that more, you're not jealous of what other people have. You're not envious. You're not trying to keep up with the Joneses. You can be
Mhm.
happy for what people have because you're like, I love that you're happy and this is your thing, but it's not my thing. So I don't feel jealous about it or envious or care about it because I know it's important to me. So that mindfulness piece, it's so amazing. And some of it's landing. Like I never know as parents, like that's the thing is these little seeds, you don't know how they're going to grow with our kids until they get older. But I was in New York with my younger son just this past spring break, and he's big into like architecture and parks and buildings. And I guess there's this new park in New York right along the water that's just called like Princess Island or something. It's just this man-made, right in the water on stilts, beautiful park. And he really wanted to see that. Like that's what he wanted to check out. And so we're there and he's running around, he's checking out and he's watching people walk to the park. And then he like stopped and reflected. He's like, you know what? Like it's these things, like the stuff that we take for granted, that's the stuff that usually makes us the happiest as he's looking at all
Mhm.
these people. And I'm like, that's the mindfulness piece. Like it's just
Mhm.
noticing those moments of like what brings you the most joy. We didn't have to go and spend, a whole bunch of money in New York to like you can to, do all the things. It was this free park running around on it and just enjoying it. And he's like, this is what makes me happy.
Oh, I love that. And for him to already grasp that at 12 or whatever age, that's pretty amazing. And I think having those conversations as early as you can to that actually sinks in with your kid will make them carry that mindfulness on, because I think that it's almost like a muscle. The more that you exercise that mindfulness, the stronger it will become, and it will become second nature when it comes to mindfulness with anything, eating, with like you said, spending money, with just anything. So really asking yourself, do I, how does this make me feel? Do I really need this? I think that that's super powerful. I love that.
Yeah.
David, what are the most important things parents can do to set their children up for future financial success? That's I think with financial literacy, that's a huge big one, talking about it, but I think that's what all of us parents want for our children. Like when you see that, oh, this kid of mine is such a spender, I am scared for them. And talking about savings, like I guess I just want to know like your top go-tos, even if it's repeating what we said, just to really make sure how we can set them up for financial success.
Yeah. I mean, the reason I emphasize those first two is because those are the big, big things to me. So the mindfulness is going to make sure that they're not always thinking they need more because that's what
Mhm.
happens. And it doesn't matter how much you have, you just need more. And I've seen that over and over again. That saving first, and then especially then the next step is making sure those savings get invested. But that saving first, that habit, that creates that lifestyle inflation. So you're not going to get into debt. You're not going to be living paycheck to paycheck. It forces enough of a buffer that you have some financial freedom. So those two pieces, like even if you're a spender and you save 10 or 20% of everything that came in, even as adults, that's going to make a big impact. But then like little practical things that I love to do with kids, because it's so hard. Like all these things, there's a million different ways to teach kids about money, and most of it's hard as parents. Like we're busy, we can't keep track of this stuff. But I love like when there's opportunities where, especially if you're on vacation or you're going somewhere or a fair or doing something where you plan as a parent to spend a bunch of money on your kids.
Mhm.
The money you plan to spend anyway, if you just give it to them and then let them make the decisions. So if you're going to like a fair, instead of having your kids, can I get this, Sunday? Can I get this toy? Can I play these games? Can I go on these rides? And they're just bugging and bugging and bugging. Give them the money you plan on spending on them anyway and let them make those decisions. Like
Wow,
that's
that's scary
massive.
for me, but amazing at the same time. Because after 30 minutes, I'll be like, well, you spent all your money. I don't know what to tell you.
Well, and that's the thing is they probably will when they first get it because they won't know, but the
Yeah.
stakes are so low. Like if you're at a fair and they spend all their money in the first 30 minutes and the rest of the time they have to just wander around like looking at everyone chase around and play and do their thing, that's the lesson. and
Mhm.
and again, try not to give them like guilt and shame and say like that was stupid and that was bad, but instead just get them to reflect like, hey, was that because maybe that is what they wanted, maybe they did just love the idea of just blowing it all, so just would you do that next time? Did you buy it? Like, is there something you wish you had saved for? How do you feel? And just let them figure it out. And that's an easy moment to start understanding it. They start seeing the money because whatever they put out, they're getting the change back. They see how much things cost. They see their brother, their sister who's, you know, got tickets at a discount because they bought a whole bunch of them and they've been riding rides all day, or they did the pass, or they see someone getting like all these like cheap little freezies and they're like, that was great. They had candy all day, like whatever it might be, they'll start to see. And then you'll have the kid too who says, I don't want to spend anything. I want to save it because I'm a saver and I'm trying to buy something big and expensive. Like it, it really, you'll see the personalities come out, but it gives them that opportunity in a low stakes environment to just have fun with it. And it makes it easy for us as parents. Like as parents, it sucks when your kids are constantly asking you for something and you have to keep saying yes or no and feeling like a gatekeeper. I'd rather just let them make the decisions.
That is so cool. And yeah, because you're, but I also love how you just said, let's then not shame them even if they do blow it 30 minutes later, because I do think that that's a very, like, natural response that a parent would say because they're trying to teach their kid, like, "Man, don't you wish you didn't do that? You could have been doing this instead." And then that does lead to guilt and shame, and that's not what we want. But instead, really having them reflect and asking them questions that you're just curious about. Well, how do you feel? What do you wish that you would have spent it on? I love that, how you spun that, because it really then is making them learn from themselves, asking those questions that they're definitely not asking internally, like, oh, what would I have done instead? So that is so cool and so powerful. And then, David, when you were saying something earlier about the savings thing, I'm now just curious, what is it that you recommend parents, you said to immediately start putting some money aside for savings, and for investing. What is it that you put your kids' money, or that you recommend families to do when kids start getting a bank account? Like, is it a Roth IRA? Like, what is it that you then say, oh gosh, this is what I recommend when you start saving money for your kids?
Yeah, so I've got my ideas, and so for me, but again, this is where like the habit is important. So once you start getting in the weeds of like exactly the mechanics, people start losing their mind, or like
Yes.
they just it's too much information. So first step, which is most important, so having the conversations, and even if you don't understand, like if you don't understand investing as a parent, let your kids know that. Say, hey, I don't know, I wish I knew more. Like make these conversations easy because there's experts that can help you. And so I like to equate it the same as like when we try to get our car fixed. Like we usually, most of us, even though we could probably change the oil in our car and probably change a tire, like we'll take it into a place to get it fixed, a car repair shop. And the same way you can do with your money and your investing, there are people that can help you out. So you can go into a bank or find a financial advisor, get help. And that's the thing is most people who are investing, even adults, don't actually know what they're invested in. Like they just don't. They know who they're going through, but the mechanics, they have no idea. Their accountant, their financial advisor, they make all those decisions.
Yes.
So that's important. So let the kids know like that part's not as important. So that's why with my guys, like I talk about stocks and they've got some individual stocks and they might watch it a bit, but I barely get into the weeds with them on that because it really doesn't matter. What matters is they feel comfortable enough to find someone they trust. And then with
Hmm.
that, like and really that comfort is how you find someone you trust. Like if you feel insecure or shame, you're not going to ask the questions. You don't want to feel stupid. And so you'll just say, okay, this sounds good, and go with someone who might not be trustworthy or that your gut tells you isn't good. So being comfortable to just ask those questions. Like I love taking, so my boys, again, I don't want to hit them over the head too much with this. So I haven't done too much with them. But like my younger cousins, for example, I've taken them into the bank with me and they've sat down with a financial advisor and they've asked the questions and it's really interesting. And then based on the responses, that'll tell them if this is someone they want to work with or not. Like, how should I
Right.
invest? Where should I put my money? What do you think? Is the market going up? Is it going down? Like they can ask any questions they want and just get comfortable. So I've done that. And then even again with the shame, I'll watch what they invest and I'm like, oh, that's, I mean, I've got a higher risk tolerance. It's not what I would invest in. But they're having those conversations and that's fine. But really what it does, if you did say like, how would you invest? For me, the biggest thing, it's so much easier now, is we can invest in the entire stock market. Like there are like single individual funds that allow us to invest in the entire stock market in an easy way where we couldn't before. And that just eliminates all of that risk with individual stocks. And so the entire stock market is a pretty safe way to go. And then long time frames. So if you're invested for a year, I don't know what's going to happen. Even 5 years, who knows? But you start investing for 10, 20, 30 years, all of a sudden that investment that seemed risky in the short term isn't. And you'll see it grow. And that's even like Warren Buffett says the same thing. Invest in the entire stock market. Just it's really hard to beat the market. And that's going to be one of your easiest things to do.
I
I
love that. I think that people are just unsure of how to talk about this with their kids and then say, okay, well, we're saving it and it needs to go somewhere. But having that conversation with them because I want my kids to feel like this is their money, that they're making the decision of where it goes and where it's being saved and being invested. And so I really like that idea of when they get older, taking them to the banker and having them ask questions and letting them get curious themselves and learn that way, but really just kind of being the facilitator of like, here, let me introduce you to someone and let's, because I feel like and maybe this is just me and my kids, but whenever I say something, oh, okay, yeah, yeah, mom, uh-huh. But when it's someone else, oh, let me actually listen to what you have to say. And I'm going to learn from this. Oh, so I really love that exercise of just taking them in and having them, maybe give them a couple of questions. Maybe you should ask this and then let your curiosity go from there and learn that way.
Yeah, and most advisors and people in the bank and stuff like they'll love that and they'll be happy to answer all those questions and then they'll pull out the charts and show here's different scenarios and that's where kids can start getting fascinated about it. So again
Mhm.
with the compound interest, it's trickier to really understand it, but if you can start seeing it, they're like, hey, if you put this $100 in today, then based on the past or this, here's some predictions of what it can be worth when you're 20, when you're 30, when you're 40. And that's where really anyone who that I've noticed that gets really passionate about investing,
Mhm.
they've seen a chart where that money just grows exponentially and they get pretty excited about it.
Yeah,
And
who wouldn't?
and so that's
Well, I would
that's how
hope.
we
I would
should.
hope.
Well, that's the part that gets people just like it changes the way you think about money. And all of a sudden that big purchase you thought you'd make this year, knowing that it would be your money would double, say in 7 or 10 years, you might you might think of that purchase differently.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that's back to the chocolate bars and Lego. So kids, I talk about chocolate bars and Lego. Adults, I talk about how much earning potential that money would have. So, oh, you wanted to buy that car? Instead of buying that car, what if you could pull $1,000 every year for the rest of your life and your kids' lives? would you still want that car? And again, it doesn't matter what the answer is. It's just
Right.
starting to show like what is that true value of money? Because even as adults, I don't think we always know what the true value is of what we're spending.
Mhm. That's so true. Oh man, this is good stuff, David. Oh gosh. So, what do you think are the most important financial concepts children should really learn about when it comes to money?
So really understanding that money, like taking that emotion away, like that's a
Mm,
big piece because we have so much shame around it. And the compound growth is a big one because that's going to get them excited about just investing in the money, earning and creating that freedom. But there's another one that we haven't touched on that I find is really important as well, is this concept of giving, but giving in the way where the more you give, the richer you are. And so a concept I talk about in my book, the rule is give and you'll have more. And I love this idea because there's so much power in giving. And a lot of us too, like I was talking to someone and they're wondering like, how do I get over this like poor mindset? I grew up in a household where we didn't have anything and we were always struggling. And I struggle with this idea of scarcity. And as soon as you start giving and helping others, it's almost impossible to feel that poor scarcity mindset. And there's so much power in it. And it does start to create this energy to it. So I do like to have that concept and making sure that it's not this idea of like sometimes it's almost patronizing. We're like, oh, we'll help the less fortunate or help this person out. But instead just understand like, no, you're helping people out. And those same
mm.
people will probably help you out. Or maybe they'll do something for you. And it's not this imbalance. It's just giving to give and noticing how it creates this full circle and comes back to you.
With that concept, how did you introduce it to your children?
Um, a lot of it is just trying to be generous and also noticing like it's tricky. Like it is tricky. It's more just one of those things where you have to almost just do it and talk about it and they follow your example.
Mhm.
And so, like, my older son is a lot more generous than even I would be. Like, he's just a generous person. And so, for him, he will, if he has something, he'll help someone out. And it could be simple things. Like, even if you see someone drop something, going over and helping them pick it up. And it doesn't always have to be money. So, just talking about that and then showing examples and helping other people out and do it in a way where it feels like it's not like these are all just people. And
Mhm.
now I have, so when my boys did get a little bit older, especially if there's charities that had matching programs, I would try to, and there were charities they were interested in, I would get them involved where I'd be like, hey, if you give me this much, they'll match, and then I'll match that for you as well. So your money can go further if you're interested. And they usually get excited about that. Or back to this idea of like going to talk to the financial advisors. If people come to the house and they're charitable organizations, usually I don't talk to them. I'll get my son to talk to them and decide if it's something he's interested in or not, and have those conversations with them.
Very cool. Yeah, because that's where I was like, I need to know how to a and I feel like example, I think that's a big lesson that I keep coming to over and over again, like, we lead by example,
Mhm.
and just showing generosity, yes, we can talk about it, but really doing it and it lets them see, "Oh, wow. I see how she made that person feel, and she feels good, and she's actually getting from it just as much as that other person's getting from it." So showing leading by example and showing that generosity, I hope, and then talking about it. What do you think? How do you think this person felt afterwards? And you know what? I also feel really good that I helped somebody else. Just also talking about those kind of moments so that they don't just get swept under the rug or just a normal everyday kind of thing. Maybe that could be helpful. Do you agree, David?
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm just thinking because I'm reflecting as well. So as me as a parent, I'm a lazy parent. I like to make things really easy and just incorporate it in my day to day. So like things like these lessons. So I was thinking, like if I notice something, I might get my kids to do the action. So like if you're on like if you're if someone's on a bus and needs a seat, I might ask my child, like, hey, why don't you get up and tell them they could sit in your seat? Or if I saw, some garbage laying on the street, I'm like, hey, can you go pick that up and put it away? Like, I don't do the action. I sort of highlight it and send them off. And my younger one will get on me all the time. He's like, come on, dad, like I'm doing all the work here. But it just teaches them those lessons and gets them used to those things. Or if you want to, you know, uh, give to someone, like I would give them the money to give it to them. Or if they see someone sad or upset, I'd be like, hey, you should go over and check on that kid, make sure they're okay. And that's the thing is, giving's not necessarily monetary. You could do it in so many different ways, and they can see that. So
Yeah, nudging them in the right direction to like think, "Oh yeah, maybe I should do that. That would be helpful." They need that guidance from time to time.
yeah.
And David, talk to us more about the awesome stuff. We've been touching on it here and there, but like let's really dive into it. What's the awesome stuff?
So the awesome stuff, like it's really what brings you joy. So what makes you feel that excitement and that joy? And that's where you notice it. Like it's really cool because I've noticed it's changed for me as well. Like the more I talk about it, the more you start realizing what really is important to you. And when are you the happiest? What are your best memories? What do you really enjoy? And for everyone, it's a little bit different, but it'll start to shift. Like for me, I start thinking about like laughing with my friends, or watching my boys laugh and smile, or doing those, like a lot of times it's just those simple things, and just noticing how it feels. So when I'm talking to someone and they say like my awesome stuff is, what a good example, I was talking to a host and his awesome stuff was a soundboard. He's a podcaster and wanted this new soundboard. But when he mentioned it, I could tell like his whole body didn't light up. He just said his awesome stuff was a soundboard. And so I started asking a bit more and asked about his kids. And he started telling me about this trip he went on with his daughters. And it was like the first time they flew on a plane. And then all of a sudden he started getting like more and more excited and lighting up. And it was so cool because it was a light bulb moment. You could feel it where he's like, oh, that's my awesome stuff. Like
Yeah.
that's what got me excited and passionate. And you can feel it in your body. Like you can feel it when you think about those things. Like you start talking to someone and then they just get more and more and more excited. And it's going to be different for everyone, but typically it's people, and it's connection, and it's freedom, and it's not things. And the more you
Yes.
sit on it, you start to see that, and it shifts everything. It shifts what's important to you.
Yeah. And then that's when we bring in the mindfulness to really be like, okay, if this is my awesome stuff, I need to be more mindful so I can invest more into those things that actually matter to me.
And bring you that joy. And
Yeah.
so, something I like to say a lot is like the more you focus on what brings you joy,
Mhm.
the more you realize what doesn't.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then you'll start to see that, oh, most of the things I've been spending money on or time on aren't the things that really bring me joy. So,
They might give me a joy in that moment, but then an hour later, am I still joyful for, over that one thing, you know?
yeah, yeah. Well, and that's the thing. And it pales in comparison once you start thinking, like once you realize what really lights you up, a lot of those things start paling in comparison. So same with that example with the soundboard. I know that he wanted that soundboard, and I know when he got it, he'd be excited, and I know it would have made, like, it would make his job better. And there's nothing wrong with the soundboard either. Like he may have bought it since our conversation, which is fine. But you could tell as he's talking about his daughters, if it came down to it and he had to make a decision, he knew what really was important. And that's the thing, is it doesn't mean we're not going to buy the things we want, and we're going to be these frugal, have nothing savers. No, it's the stuff just doesn't feel as great anymore. Like
Mhm.
it you don't get as excited about the things that don't bring you joy. And the things that do, you start realizing, no, you know what I want to do? I want to create this, like I want to go to the beach with my kids and invite all their friends and get ice cream for everybody. Like that's what I want to do. I don't
Mhm.
want to, go and, you know, do a dinner with a smaller dinner with the family at this expensive restaurant, and the kids are, fighting at the table and nobody's happy. And, you start noticing the things that just really do bring you that lasting joy. And so even as you said, like those little flickers of like happiness, they
Mhm.
just they feel less and less and less.
Yeah. Especially when you become more mindful. You're like, "Oh, wow. It's
Yeah.
I don't really need that. I just want it," which is
Yeah.
fine. We all have those, moments of want, but then really realizing, I can do without. I'll be fine."
Yeah. And this is a warning to parents listening too. As you start having these conversations with your kids, they'll spin it back on you.
Oh,
So
no.
so they will. Dad, really? Is that your awesome stuff? And and I mean, some of the stuff is ridiculous. And you're like, no, that probably isn't. And they'll catch you.
Oh gosh, I can see it now just playing out, David. Oh, but you know what? Sometimes we need to get called out too. If we're going to be, dishing it, we got to be able to take it.
Oh yeah. And sometimes I like to be ridiculous with it anyway, especially like I've got a teenage, almost two teenage boys. So I'll definitely tease them. Like I had some collar stays that when you take them, they're just metal collar stays, but they're also bottle openers, which I think is brilliant. But you just see them rolling their eyes, like, really, Dad?
Really,
Really?
Dad?
That's your thing? Like, yeah, that
Hey,
is.
let me have my moment, okay?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, David, this has been such a great conversation and so much that I personally can take away from my kids. And I know that our listeners will be doing the same. Do you have any just final thoughts that you'd like to leave our audience with?
No, just have these conversations with kids. That's why I wrote my book. So I mentioned the book's The Golden Quest, and it's a graphic novel. And it's one of those things where I encourage parents to read it with their kids, just to have these conversations and start talking about money. And as soon as we start talking about money, it's this whole idea of like shame sort of survives when we don't talk about it. But as soon as we start talking about it, the shame disappears and we can have these conversations. That's it. So back to your original question, like what's financial literacy? It's just talking about money. Like I want my boys to grow up not knowing it all, but having enough comfort that they don't mind seeking out the answers when they don't have them and
Mhm.
asking for help and just having these conversations.
This is great. Oh gosh, David, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your knowledge with us. We just so genuinely appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much. I mean, I love this stuff and sharing it. And especially when kids get it, they get it so much quicker than adults. It's amazing.
I love that. That's so cool. And that speaks volumes that, you know what, if we introduce it early enough, it will be easier for them to understand because I feel like once you're an adult, you're just stuck in your ways of how you're thinking, linear, like you said. But,
Yeah.
with children, they're so much more adaptable and they can pick up on it faster than us old people.
So much faster. And then they'll hold us accountable. The whole idea is that they're teach your kids and they can teach the adults.
I love it. Love it. Oh my gosh, this was so good. Thank you again, David. And for our listeners out there to learn more about David, you can find him online at David Delisle. That's DavidDelisle.com or on Instagram at The Awesome Stuff. Our team will be posting today's episode on our Baby Chick Facebook page and Instagram page at the Baby Chick Chat. So if you have any questions or comments about our discussion, please share them with us in the comments section. As always, if you haven't already, please subscribe to Chick Chat, the Baby Chick podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts, and leave us an honest review. Cheers to financial literacy and financial freedom.